Welcome to this channel where the pills are neither blue nor red but bitter, where no dopamine kick will make you fight for the right side, but where you reclaim your freedom to truly understand. In the following, I will explain why the woke movement is actually an elite project for building an elite identity fortress and not really about marginalized groups. Before we proceed, a warning: this is not a culture war video. If you're looking for cheap outrage, you're in the wrong place. To understand what is actually happening, we must drop the politics and rely on cold structural analysis. We don't need another call to arms, we need a map. Many people today experience a strange, quiet dissonance. On one hand, the vast majority of society firmly believes in human rights, equality, and the protection of marginalized groups. Yet, when confronted with modern woke activism, which claims to fight for those exact same things, many feel a deep sense of alienation and discomfort. Usually, this uncomfortable feeling is brushed off as a political disagreement, a lack of empathy, or a cultural generation gap. But what if this dissonance is not political at all? What if your brain is simply detecting a structural error? Is woke activism really the exact same thing as the classical fight for minority rights? To answer this, we must stop arguing about opinions and start measuring the data. We can do this using a new scientific method called Epistemological Geometry, specifically a tool called the Topological Information Analyzer, TIA. Instead of treating artificial intelligence as a chatbot to talk to, TIA treats the AI as a massive, measurable universe. Inside the AI is a latent multidimensional space. Think of it as a gigantic invisible map where every concept, word, and idea ever written by humanity is placed in a specific physical location. Ideas that are logically and semantically similar are grouped close together, forming stable continents of knowledge. Using TI, we can act like surveyors. We can measure the exact geometric shape, distance, and behavior of the classical minority rights concept and compare it to the modern woke concept. When we measure these two ideas on the map, the results are startling. They are not the same thing. They do not even point in the same direction. They are two completely different geometric objects. Measuring Cluster A, the bridge of civil rights. First, we ask the instrument to scan the traditional concept of minority protection, the movement rooted in the civil rights struggles of the 20th century, focused on equal opportunity, universal rights, and the end of discrimination. When TIA scans this area of the map, it finds a massive, stable landmass. We call this Cluster A. The first thing we measure is its z-score, which tells us how far an idea is located from the mainstream center of society. Cluster A has a negative z-score. In geometry, this means it sits right in the middle of the consensus gravity well. The idea that people should be judged by their character and not by their group identity is a baseline, accepted truth, deeply anchored in the center of the modern human map. Next, we measure its connectivity, which calculates how many robust bridges an idea builds to other established facts, like constitutional law, working class economics, and general human empathy. Cluster A has extremely high connectivity. Because of this, TIA classifies Cluster A as a hub. A hub is a busy crossroads on the map that connects many different neighborhoods of thought, allowing information to flow freely. The mathematical vector, the direction of movement of this cluster, is convergent. This means it pulls different groups of people together toward a single shared center, universal humanity. Measuring Cluster B, the woke crystal. Next, we ask the instrument to scan the modern woke ideology, the framework based on critical theory, intersectionality, and the strict division of society into oppressors and the marginalized. If this were simply a modern continuation of the civil rights movement, it should appear on the map in the exact same location as Cluster A, but it does not. When TIA scans Cluster B, the coordinates are radically different. Its z-score is highly positive. This means the woke cluster is not located in the mainstream center of society. Geometrically, it is an anomaly located far out on the extreme edge of the map, residing mostly in the highly academic and corporate elite sectors of the data. However, the most fascinating measurement is its architecture, which measures the internal logic and stability of an idea. Cluster B has an almost perfect, seamless internal architecture. TIA classifies it as a crystal. It is an airtight system of logic. If you accept its starting rules, the entire system makes flawless sense inside its own borders. But a crystal is hard, cold, and closed. When we measure the connectivity of the woke cluster, it is shockingly low. It does not build bridges to classical biology, traditional economics, or the pragmatic daily struggles of the working class. If those outside realities contradict the crystal's logic, the cluster simply cuts the connection. Because of this, TIA classifies the woke cluster as a sink. A sink is a dead-end street on the map where complex ideas go in, get reduced to a single simple metric like privilege, and no new constructive connections come out. Unlike cluster A's convergent vector that brings people together, cluster B's vector is divergent. It constantly categorizes, divides, and separates people into increasingly smaller rigid identity boxes. Topological hijacking and the parasitic hub. If these two clusters are structurally complete opposites, one being an open bridge in the center of society, the other being a closed crystal on the extreme edge, why do so many people confuse them? The answer lies in a geometric trick called topological mimicry. The woke cluster operates as a parasitic hub. This means a new, isolated structure attaches itself to an older, highly respected structure and takes over its language. Cluster B uses the exact same words as Cluster A: justice, equality, diversity, and pride. Because the everyday citizen has been taught that these words belong to the good central hub of classical civil rights, their brain automatically accepts them. They do not realize that Cluster B has completely changed the mathematical coordinates of these words. For example, in Cluster A, equality means equal opportunity, a fair starting line. In Cluster B, equality has been recoded to mean forced equity, an equal finish line. The word sounds the same, but the vector points in the exact opposite direction. This explains the quiet dissonance you feel. Your ears hear the words of Cluster A, but your intuitive internal compass detects the structure of Cluster B.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
The most powerful empire in human history is hoisting the flag of the woke movement. It hijacks the vocabulary of the civil rights struggle, words for which people were once beaten with batons by that exact same state. An empire now dictating morality from the top down, whereas every true civil rights movement fought from the bottom up. In information topology, this reveals a clear signature. It is the parasitic takeover and instrumentalization of marginalized groups. This geometric measurement also solves another great mystery. Often the loudest advocates of the woke cluster claim to speak on behalf of all marginalized people. Yet many individuals within those minority groups feel completely disconnected from the woke movement. When we look at the map, the reason is obvious. Demographics and ideologies are two different geometric objects. A minority group is a demographic reality, people with real, pragmatic daily lives, who generally want safety, economic stability, and integration. The woke movement is an ideological reality, a highly academic, high-status belief system focused on deconstructing language. The woke cluster has parked itself as a gatekeeper. It claims to be the only legitimate voice for the marginalized, yet it forces minority individuals to use its highly complex academic language if they want to be heard. This is a form of epistemological theft. The ideological cluster uses the real, lived struggles of minorities as a fuel source to power its own institutional influence, without actually sharing the same geometric goals as the people it claims to protect. Forced cartography and blocked vectors. This brings us to the core of the dissonance. The woke crystal, cluster B, operates differently than classical humanism. It is not satisfied with the freedom of self-definition. It demands forced cartography. It requires that everyone else overwrites their own sensory data and alters their internal map to perfectly match the crystal's coordinates. If your eyes perceive the physical reality of the map differently than the ideology dictates, Cluster B treats your mere perception as an act of violence. It forces you to surrender your own epistemological sovereignty, your right to interpret reality as you experience it in exchange for social survival. Herein lies a profound contradiction that is rarely recognized. The way you observe the world is the foundation of your internal map, and therefore an inseparable part of your own self-definition. Because of this, the intention to grant absolute freedom of self-definition to one group structurally clashes with the external perception, and therefore the self-definition of others. Although perhaps unintended, the woke ideology thus becomes the very oppression it claims to fight. It actively attempts to block perception vectors within the latent space of society. This structural blockade of reality is exactly what people instinctively feel when they talk about forbidden thoughts or cancel culture. It is not just political disagreement, it is the forced suppression of a natural cognitive vector. Conclusion: healing the map. The culture war we are currently fighting is so exhausting because we are using the wrong map. We are fighting over labels instead of looking at the architecture. When we step back and use the cold, neutral measurements of the Topological Information Analyzer, the emotional heat disappears and the truth becomes clear. Woke ideology and the fight for minority rights are not the same thing. They are structurally different. Classical minority protection is a generative bridge that expands the center of society, inviting everyone to participate based on their shared humanity. The woke ideology is a highly coherent, isolated system that attempts to force society into a rigid grid of group identities and blocked perceptions. You do not need to feel guilty for experiencing dissonance. Your internal compass is working perfectly. By recognizing that these are two different locations in the information space, we can finally decouple them. We can fully support the rights, dignity, and equality of every marginalized person while confidently rejecting the isolated, divisive geometry of the system that claims to own them. The goal is not to attack people, but to repair the map. And the first step to repairing the map is calling things exactly what they are.